All right, welcome to Talk-Jitsu with host Uki Mike, Joey Boretski, and me, Jordan Preisinger from Jordan Teaches Jiujitsu. Today we have a great episode for you guys today. And we're going to talk about concepts and fundamental techniques that we don't quite think are fundamental. So I think it's going to be a very exciting conversation. So we're going to start off with just talking about the wrist lock video I did with Henshi Scott Taylor, who's a good friend of mine. And it's funny. It's just some context and background. So it's a video that shows a lot of weird wrist locks. I don't know. Did you watch it, Joey?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Like, there's definitely some cool wrist locks, but I'll be the first one to admit that they're kind of niche, and they can be low percentage for sure. And because I got some heat on Reddit, only one guy is like, Bullshido, which basically means like bullshit techniques or whatever. But the mechanics are there. They're fundamentally sound in the sense that, like, you twist someone's wrist like that, it's gonna hurt them. They're gonna have to tap. But I think that what people kind of misunderstand what low percentage means. It doesn't mean that it doesn't work, on good people ever. Like, and you have to only do it on crappy people who don't know what they're doing. I think what low percentage means is that it's just not available very often. So like, like those exact setups might not be there very often. You might not get the exact look you need from your opponent to actually go for it. But there can be times against someone that's good even where you can get something like that. And a good example is, one time I was rolling with a black belt from 10th Planet, and I had him in side control, and he put me in an Americana. He was on the bottom and I was on the top, and he got me in the Americana grip. And I was thinking, this is not going to do anything. I'm not worried about this. And then he like reversed me with it. I'm like, shit, this actually worked. But when I started to try to use it when I was grappling, and I couldn't get it. But like, so I would think I would say it's a low percentage move, but he did it on someone that, I think I'm pretty good, and he got it on me. So yeah, I don't think that that's what low percentage means. That doesn't work on anyone or anyone that's good. So just, not available often. And definitely those wrist locks hurt pretty bad. But the thing is like, I wanted him to go hard on the wrist locks. And I told him to, because I want to show these like brutal wrist locks, right? And I wanted them to look brutal. So I was willing to sacrifice my wrists for the viewers. And I said that in the video, and I still have people being like, oh, he's a dick for like going hard on the submissions. But it's like, guys, like this is what I wanted. So yeah, I thought it was an interesting thing.
It looked brutal as hell. I mean, I watched it through my fingers 3 times. That one called the dirty bag, I think it's called.
Yeah. Which one was that?
It's one where he kneed you in the wrist, and it sounded like your wrist cracked in half. It was brutal. I
think that's one of the highest percentage ones he showed, because if you have someone Kesikatami and have their arm straight, and their wrist is straight, and you can't bend it just with the force of your hands, then you can just knee it and get that bend there, and then you start going for it. I thought that was a really cool one.
Yeah, that was my favorite one.
And Joe, you're like a wrist lock connoisseur. I'm surprised you didn't watch it, and take some from there. Like, do you do like I only ever see really in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu like the gooseneck style of wrist lock. I don't really see like the twisting style from like Aikido and Japanese Jiu-Jitsu and other martial arts. Like, do you do any of those twisting type of wrist locks?
I've tried them. I find in Jiu-Jitsu I have less success with those, as opposed to like just the flat like bending the wrist forward. Usually when you're twisting, I just find I have a really hard time controlling the rest of the body, because when you start twisting someone's wrist, people will spin, they'll move, they'll roll to try and take the pressure off. To get those, you kind of need more control. Whereas like the straight, like just standard jiu-jitsu style wrist lock can come on really quick, because you really only need control of the back of the elbow.
Exactly. That's something people don't realize, that it's really, when you go for wrist lock, you need the elbow controlled first and foremost, because if you push back against the wrist and the elbow can move too, then it's not going to, put any actual pressure on the wrist. It's just going to move the whole arm. But if you stop the elbow from moving, well, that's when the wrist lock's going to work. So yeah, I think that's like a really important concept of wrist locks, like control the elbow. And is there anything else we want to talk about the wrist lock conversation?
Well, I know we've talked about it in part before, but why do you think it's not used so much? Like, I know you said it's low percentage, but I mean, if you become very proficient at it and you practice it all the time, it can be just like any other move. It's just another piece of the tool in your toolkit. If you're going for an armbar, why not grab the wrist lock? It's right there.
Yeah, I think that is because for some reason wrist locks have a bad rap to them. People, I think it's because there's like a big joke around them, like, it's prison rules and stuff like that. And I think that, we talked about it before. I think that jiu-jitsu is getting a little bit soft. I do. And I think that's why, like, if you do a wrist lock on someone, you don't hurt them, then what's the issue there? Like, it's just a part of your body that can be submitted. I don't see the big, it's not a big deal. But I think that's why it's a little taboo. And yeah, I think also because it is available less often. But I mean, Joey like ruined someone's wrist in a tournament. I have that footage, and we were going to put it in another podcast. I couldn't find it, but then I recently found it again where it was in my Google Drive. So that was a badass wrist lock. But why do you think, Joey, wrist locks aren't super common?
I think people just aren't really comfortable or familiar with like the mechanics of how they work, because people don't actually invest the time needed to get good at them. Like most submissions, it really is just time in. I mean, if you did 2, 3, 4 arm bars ever, you would never really understand how the arm bar works or where you can get it from, and how often it's available and how to make things work when things go wrong. And wrist locks really, I think the reason a lot of people don't put the time in is because it's not really worth it in the long run. Like you said, like they are kind of a niche submission. They're not always there available. And realistically, most people have a limited amount of time on the mats. And if you can only work 1 or 2 submissions, is the wrist lock going to be the one that's going to give you the most bang for your buck when it comes to spending your time? Probably not. So people don't spend the time, they don't get comfortable with it, and then they're not as proficient. And you just don't really see them because of that.
I think you're exactly right. Like, I think they're a good tool to have in your toolkit. But if for most people, it might not be the best use of your toolkit if you have a smaller toolkit. So people like like black belts or anyone with like a large repertoire, like why not learn like everything you can, even if it's a low percentage. I want to learn everything, and like that's my mentality. But I definitely understand if like you're limited in time and resources to practice some more higher percentage techniques for sure. That definitely makes sense. And it's kind of, to go back to like the elbow type of concept, that kind of segues into what I do want to talk about, which is concepts in jiu-jitsu. And I think that the concepts in jiu-jitsu are so important, but they're not often taught. And to me, concepts are fundamentals, and what aren't fundamentals are certain techniques like for example, I had someone ask me about a closed guard armbar, and they're having low success with it. Yet the closed guard armbar is taught so often to beginners as if it's like a fundamental move, but it's actually one of the hardest techniques to actually get from closed guard. And I think that the reason why quote unquote certain fundamentals are taught to beginners is just because they're easy to teach and kind of easy for the person to perform during the technique portion where they practice. But then when they do it when they're rolling, then they don't have success, and then they start having like doubts, and they start having thinking like they suck at jiu-jitsu, but in reality they're not really taught the best highest percentage moves, and they don't learn the concepts because they're just so rarely taught. Like, how often do you hear about protecting your head from being controlled, which is something that I've really went over a lot in my YouTube channel, and it just blows people's minds but like, why aren't they learning that in class? You know what I mean? Yeah. I was teaching last night, and I was telling everyone that protecting your head from being controlled is rule number 1. And people they don't learn that. And that is like what's actually important in jiu-jitsu is like the in-between. And what the in-between is defense, because you can't just do techniques the whole time, which I've talked about before. Because if you don't defend first, you're not going to be able to actually get any offense going. So like beginners, they don't learn actual defense. They only learn offensive techniques and escapes. But like, why not learn defense? Why is defense not being taught? Why is it not like, really drilled into people's heads? Don't let people control your head. Don't let people get underhooks. Like, those are the most important grips to take. And it blows my mind that it can be so like revolutionary to people to learn from me, because they're not learning at their gym. And it definitely is very important. And it's not the student's fault. It's the instructor's fault for not talking about that stuff. So yeah, I think that's yeah, a little frustrating for me sometimes. But yeah, like, what do you guys think are the most important concepts, and but also that you've learned, but also what do you think there are fundamental techniques that just don't work great?
For myself, the fundamental or the concepts that I use the most recently, especially, is the inside position, making sure they don't grab my head, making sure I can get an underhook, protecting them from getting an underhook. And it sounds silly now, me being a purple belt, but it's only now that I'm really starting to focus on it. Like, I know you've taught that for a while, but ever since you put your course out, it's really drilled into my head. I have to search for underhooks. I have to stop them from grabbing my head. And it's changed everything. I don't think about what they're doing so much as like what technique they're trying to do on me. I just focus on, I need to get an underhook. I need to stop them from grabbing my head. And then I can focus more on my offense.
Yeah, because if you know what they need, then you just shut down what they need.
Exactly.
And to control you, they need inside position. And to go back on our earlier conversation from last month, it's been a while since we've done a podcast. We were talking about inside position is closed guard, inside position. And I've 100% concluded that closed guard is inside position. There's just no way around it, because I came up with, like, I guess a better, not definition, but like another definition of it, almost like another way of saying it, which is that you need to keep your defense on the inside of their offense. So if you think about closed guard, like, Joey, what would you do if you were passing and someone was trying to put you in closed guard?
I'm just going to ram a knee up so that they can't wrap and close around me. That's my, I don't like closed guard. I fucking hate being in people's closed guards. So my whole closed guard defense is let them ever close the guard.
And exactly. I knew you were going to say that, because that is what you need to do to stop closed guards. So you put your knee up off the mat, and so your shin is in the way, your frame is in the way. That's your defense, right? So you're keeping your defense on the inside of their offense, and which is something I've talked a lot about before, that like your knees to feet, your hands to your elbow, that's all your defense. It's what you use to protect your inside position. And when people get inside of that, that's when they have inside position. So I kind of differentiate it between controlling the inside space, which is like being actually on the inside, and then gripping, and then inside position grips, where you're gripping those places on their body that are past their elbows and past their knees. So I think that just proves right there, because again, you keep your frame in the way, your defense, like frames are defensive, and then they can't get closed guard, because that's an offensive grip. It's an inside position grip. So does that change your mind, Joey? Do you think closed guard still is outside position?
I see what you mean. I definitely do. I think it really just comes to how people define inside position, because I've seen so many different people's opinions or definitions, and depending how you define it, like if we go by the intent, I think it definitely is inside position, but some people have definitions that by the actual way they're explaining it, it would be outside. I think it really does come down to how you define it, but I think the intent is definitely that it is inside position.
But what do you think someone that would say that it's outside position, what do you think that their definition of inside position would be like, or how can they make that argument that that's outside position?
I don't think they could make a particularly strong argument, other than the fact that you have access to, maybe like as the person inside the closed guard, I have access to the insides of your hips.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. But like the thing is, like, both have inside positions. So they have relative amounts, because they're both controlling the person's torso or hips, right? And what is going to differentiate who's in better position is who has inside position with the rest of their body. So for example, if I'm in top closed guard and I start controlling your biceps, I now have my arms on the inside of yours. So, I'm inside your defense, because if you had your arms on the inside of my arms, you could use them defensively, but you can't use them defensively when they're on the outside. So that's one thing that I really went over a lot in my theory course lately, like adding new content, is really differentiating. It's not just about getting inside position. It's getting the most amount of inside position, because we have 4 limbs and a head, and the more inside position you have, the more you're going to control your opponent. So for example, if you're wrestling, right, and this is what we went over last night in class, like if you both have an underhook, and you're just standing straight on each other, then you have a pretty even position. You get the exact same grips. You have even amounts of inside position. But then who's going to have more inside position is who positions their head on the inside for proper head positioning, which is very important in wrestling, where you can use it defensively until you're ready to go for an attack, which we talked about earlier. It's like you got to be defensive before you're offensive. So in that case, the person who has head positioning has more inside position. So it's not just who has more with their limbs, but also who has deeper grips with the grips that are inside position. So if I have a deep underhook and you have a shallow overhook, then I have more inside position than you do. But if we have both, like I've got just a regular underhook, you've got a regular overhook, then we have even amounts. And then again, I can like get more inside position. I can more like get a better position by getting head position. So it's about getting more and more with each limb. And going back to close guard, if you're on the bottom and you're inside of my arms, you're inside of my defense, then you can start going for attacks too, like Kimuras, hip bump sweeps and stuff like that. So, it's relatively even amounts when it comes to the legs, but then then it comes down to the arms. So yeah.
So when it comes to jump back to the close guard armbar, why do you see it so successful in MMA and so unsuccessful in BJJ?
Because so
I'm pretty noob when it comes to MMA. So for anybody else out there too.
Yeah. So the reason is because in MMA, they don't control you as much in the sense of like their grips are more used to punch you and stuff like that. They're not just going to hold on to you and control unless they're in a low posture, but they're not going to be high postured and, just not doing anything with their arms. They're going to want to punch you. Right. And the person on the bottom is going to want to, pull you down and whatnot. So so when you're using your arms and punching, you leave yourself exposed to possibly being armbarred, because then your arms aren't like on the person really tight and because that's the hard thing to do. Once you bring their elbow onto your body, onto your chest, then it's easier to go for the armbar. But not a lot of people in jiu-jitsu are going to let you bring their elbow past onto your chest, right? And then again, people in MMA, they'll lean forward with their arms and stuff, kind of leave them dangling, whatever. And just the level in MMA just isn't always great either. But so there's a lot of reasons. But even then, how often do you see close guard armbars? You do see them, and you see them more than in jiu-jitsu. But they're still not like a super common submission, mostly because people are just because it's just hard to get on people.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I was basically just going to say, I think the level of grappling, especially jiu-jitsu and MMA, is just bad. So you can get away with doing things that aren't optimal because the person defending is just not good.
Yeah. I thought because they were so slick and slippery that they'd be able to yank their arm out easier, but
well, that often does happen for sure. I mean, because there's a difference between like going for an armbar and actually like finishing it, because that's something people don't always realize either, is that a lot of times you can get the armbar, like get in position, but then you need to break defensive grips. And that, that's a hard thing to do in itself, especially when you're on the bottom, because now they have like their weight and gravity. They can use their legs to drive into you. And if you start trying to break their defensive grips with your arms, you start losing control of them. So you go from like breaking their grips control to breaking their grips. That's why it's better to be on top, with their back on the mat, you're in a more of a top position for the armbar, because you can use your arms to break the grips easier and still control the person, because their back's on the mat. They can't really use their legs to drive into you. They can still try to bridge into you, but then that's why it's a great time to hook the legs so that they can't bridge into you.
Would you say in straight ankle lock is another example of a fundamental technique that's taught and not used very well?
No, only because I don't think that ankle locks are even taught often to beginners. They're still a little bit taboo. And I think that they do work pretty good, other than people especially people like me. Like I've got really flexible ankles, and I'm not going to tap to an ankle lock. And a lot of people won't tap to ankle locks. So I don't know.
I love doing ankle locks. I was just, I don't see it as much in the higher levels. Like, I mean, Mikey Musumeci won the world championships with it, but I mean, other than, I don't watch a lot of gi jiu-jitsu, but I don't see it in no gi very often.
Well, I love when people try to ankle lock me, and oftentimes I'll just give people my ankles just to I don't know, almost like freak them out, where like they're just trying their hardest, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm okay, and just like thumbs up, and they're like, are you crazy? Nah, I'm just my ankle's pretty flexible. But techniques I would say are kind of fundamentally taught as fundamentals that aren't great are also some sweeps, like a hip bump sweep isn't that high percentage. But the thing is, it's kind of difficult because it is higher percentage on a beginner, because beginners lean back, they don't control you as much. But then like against someone good, they're going to control your posture, and they're not just going to lean back and let you hip bump sweep them. So it can be a little tough too. I mean, Americana is another example. Like, it might be, it's easier to get an Americana on a beginner, but harder on someone that's good. So like, I don't think that Americana is like the highest percentage submission, but again, they can be used against beginners decently. But are we teaching people to beat people that aren't great, or are we teaching people to beat people that aren't great just in the earlier days to build confidence? So I don't know. Like, there's pros and cons to both, right?
So you guys gave me a little bit of heads up that we were going to talk about this in low percentage fundamental techniques. And I actually wrote 2 down that I figured you were going to bring up, and it was close guard, armbar, and hip bump sweep. So I kind of had I was kind of thinking about, like, because even I do this in my beginner classes, I show close guard, armbars, and hip bump sweeps from guard. And I kind of decided to sit down and think, like, they're not things I actually do when I roll, because they are relatively low percentage and they're hard to do against good people. But why do we show them? And I think I actually have an answer. So the armbar from closed guard, to me, it's less about like, here's a finish, and it's more about the ideas and movements involved. So the reason I show it is because if you can do a closed guard armbar and you practice it a few times, you get comfortable with it, you're getting used to the idea of using your feet on your partner's hips to pivot your hips underneath your partner. And you're getting practice controlling your partner's posture without having to use your hands to control the posture. Because when I'm going for an armbar, I can't just reach both my hands up and hold your head. Like you see, I'm sure we've all seen a white belt tournament where someone's on bottom and their coach yells, control his posture, and they just reach up and try and grab the head. And it's like, well, yeah, you're controlling his posture, but now you can't do anything else because both your hands are committed to someone's head. But when you go for the closed guard armbar, I'm using my legs to control your posture while also learning how to pivot my hips underneath you, which I think is a really fundamental skill, not just for closed guard armbars, but from a lot of open guards. I'm a really big proponent of K guard, which really is a similar motion, the way you enter it from a closed guard, as how you would go for an armbar. I need to underhook a leg, pivot my hips out from underneath, control your posture. So I think that's why I show those. And for hip bump sweep, it's less about the hip bump sweep itself. Not that the hip bump sweep won't work if someone leans back, but it's more about the idea of, for me, lifting your hips up and getting your hips engaged from the bottom. I know you've talked about before, when you scramble, the hip height is actually super important when you scramble. Getting your hips above your partner will really help you scramble. So the hip bump sweep for me, like, getting on your side, lifting those hips up and driving them, it may not be the most applicable from the closed guard hip bump sweep, but if you can do that motion and understand that if your hips come up, you're going to have a better odds of taking your partner over when you start to scramble. They're transferable skills that are shown in a very easily digestible way.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think what would make it be even like these techniques be even better for people to gain that is for the instructors to go over the concepts as they're teaching, because that's a great point you brought up. Like the hip bump sweep is a great example of getting your hips higher, right? But like, it's just taught like, this is how you do it. You know what I mean? But instructors should be like, this is a great example of getting your hips higher and why that's important, right? And it's just, again, it's just not often taught, which, again, I think the fundamentals are the concepts. Like that's a fundamental in itself to me, that you got to get your hips higher to win scrambles and just to get sweeps in general. I mean, you need to get your hips higher at some point, and different sweeps are have different kind of mechanics that way, where it might not be so obvious, but when it's like a hip bump sweep, it's more obvious that you need to lift your hips, right? And I think that would make these techniques higher percentage for people too, is giving them like instructions on how to actually get them, not just how to do it, right? And that comes from conceptual, right? So if I'm in closed guard, I want to get a hip bump sweep. Well, getting inside position first can allow me to put their hands on the mat, right? But then we do, like, instructors do teach that. They teach like the praying motion, right? And like but they teach that as that's how you do it. That's like a good way to set up the hip bump. But it should be like, why do you do the praying motion? What does that do? It gets their defense on the outside. You need to get your, like their defense on the outside. Like you get inside position first, and then you can, now you get your hips higher, right? You block their post, all that kind of stuff. And, again, it's just not taught. It's like so I think there's merit definitely in teaching these things to people, but they also need to include the concepts. And I think that the hip bump sweep is like decent when like applied with like other techniques. So like the Kimura, for example, because if you just go for like a naked hip bump sweep, the like the probability of that happening are pretty low unless they are just leaning right back. But if you're going for a Kimura first and they're defending the Kimura by tucking their arm, well, that's a great time to go for the hip bump sweep, right? And how do you get the Kimura? You get inside position first, right? And you control postures. So yeah, it's I think that we just need to give the concepts too. Instructors need to give the concepts too.
I also like the concept of an A/B system. Always having something, if you can't do A, do B, fall back on that. Like you just said, if you can't get the hip bump sweep, you go for the Kimura, and back and forth. One sets up the other.
Yeah, that's something I talked about in one of my newsletters too. It's like, you don't need to learn like 1,000 random techniques. What's better to do is like pick a technique that you're good at and then learn like the counters to them and how to counter those counters. So you always have like A, B, C, D to go to, and you're not like, just kind of in the dark of what to do. Because if someone tucks their arm for a Kimura and you only have a Kimura, but like you have other stuff, right? But you don't have that B system of going hip bump. Well, that's going to make it's going to make it harder for you because you only have the Kimura in you, right? But then if you have the B from there, or I guess the C, whatever you want to say, like if they do post their hand on the mat, well, then you can like to stop the sweep, then you can go for a triangle, right? So it's like building these like systems, and it's not like these things need to be memorized like crazy. It's only like a couple techniques in a row, and rather than having to memorize like 1,000 random techniques. So yeah, I think that the A/B system type stuff works really good. I need to make a video on like a bunch of A/B systems. People keep asking me to, and I keep not doing it. I'll do it soon.
I don't know if you could even fit all of them into one video. I mean, every class I teach at my gym is an AB or ABC system based off of the most common responses to technique A. Because like, I'm sure you guys would agree, most techniques that you go for, submissions or sweeps, really only have like one or two effective or viable, or we can even say common ways to defend them. I mean, most things don't have that many things people do to stop them. And especially teaching as the ABC, if you're prepared before the person even starts defending for that response, you're so well set up to execute a counter. You're essentially a step ahead. I mean, I know if I go for a certain sweep and I know their most common way of defending is going to be to post the arm out to defend it, but I'm ready before I even start the first sweep. I know your arm is going to go out there. I know where you're going to be 3 seconds before you're there. That's like a cheat code. I mean, if you told someone, we're going to play a game of chess, but I get to know where your pieces are going to be every time you move 10 seconds in advance before you do the move, or 2 moves in advance, it's hard to lose, man. Like, you're cheating. I know where you're going to be before you're there.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And I think a great example of that is like a triangle, because if you get someone in a triangle, like we're talking about defense, not escapes. So you're talking about defense. So like you can either go up to posture up to get out, or you can drive forward to stack them, right? Those are the only 2 possible ways really they can go for defense specifically. And then there's different ways to escape, but like being able to counter their defense, I think, is more important than be able to counter their escapes, because escapes are more like dependent on where you are in it, right? But if you can counter their defense from the beginning, it's going to shut down their escapes entirely, right? So I think you're exactly right. And yeah, I think people sometimes think that jiu-jitsu is more complicated than it is. Like, so many things, there's only like a couple things you can do, and if you understand that, then it just makes the objective easier, right? So another great example that going on topic is like, if you're trying to pass half guard, you can grab underneath the armpit, or you can grab the head, like especially nogi. Like, where else are you going to grab? You know what I mean? Like, those are the inside position grips. Unless you're passing from like a lower, like a lower body type pass from half guard, maybe you switch to like go over under or something like that. But that's like, I'm talking about upper body. So yeah, which is more like traditional half guard. So, again, there's only like so many grips you can grab. And if you understand that, well, now when you're in half guard, you're not like thinking like, shit, what do I do? You know what I mean? Like, what techniques do I remember? It's like, well, no, get your grips first. And then once you have your grips that you need, then you can start doing the techniques, it can't be the reverse order. It's not like you're in half guard thinking like, oh, what technique should I do? And because there's so many different ones to get your grips, and the options are very limited. And then you can start, attacking way easier, and it takes less time that way. You got to think less. Support for Talk-Jitsu is brought to you by Manscaped, who's the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Their products are precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped Performance Package is the ultimate men's hygiene bundle. Join over 7 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer for you. 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code JTJ at manscaped.com. If my math is correct, that's about 14 million balls. So what's your experience been with Manscaped?
Well, I've used probably a half a dozen different name brand products before, and they're terrible. I've cut myself every time, and these are very expensive, very well named brand products. And with Manscaped, I've never cut myself.
Exactly. And you know what I like the most about the Manscaped razor is it has a flashlight on it. And you think
that's the best.
It's amazing. You think that, it's just this feature or whatever, but actually it's kind of like, when you experience a light on your razor, it makes you wonder why no other ones have that too, because this is a game changer. You can just see everything so much easier, even if you don't have the perfect lighting. So that was my favorite aspect of it. I was actually shocked how much better it made too, because I was doing my neckline and everything. I was like, I can actually see where the line should be, right? Because there's a light. It's so simple and so smart. So I really like that from Manscaped.
100%. I thought, is this a gimmick? And then I tried it. I was like, no, this is the way. This is the only razor I've ever had that has a light on it, and it really lights the way to shaving your balls.
It does. It makes all the difference. I think a lot of other brands are maybe more towards like your hair or just your beard or something, right? But this is like the full package. So guys, JTJ at checkout, let's go.
Go ahead, Joey.
Oh no, you go ahead.
I was going to say, I think another concept that works that is obviously fundamental is position before submission. I see a lot with brand new guys. They'll see something and dive right on it, and they don't have a solid foundation to get that submission. And that's the number one mistake I see brand new guys do. They learn a guillotine in class, and they dive on it before they're in the proper position first, and then it's just easy to get out. You can see it coming a mile away. And it took me a while when I first started to learn that I need to get that position solidified before I can go for that submission.
Yeah, I agree. I heard a better wording for that, which I like better actually. Instead of position before submission, like control before submission is actually better, because it kind of like position before submission kind of like fools people into thinking that they need to get to like, I don't know, like a mount or side control before they can attack, stuff like that, right? But it's really control before submission, right? And how do you control someone? You get inside position, right? Because outside position is great for sweeps and takedowns for like certain ones, but like to actually control someone, you control from the inside, and you need to have adequate control before you can attack, and you need to defend before you can attack. So people they get so, I don't know, excited to attack and they attack before it's available. So that's something I'm trying to talk about a lot in my course and my newsletter too. It's like you need to have patience. Like patience to be fundamentally sound, be defensive before the opportunity is available to attack. And it just happens all the time. Like people try to like knee slide before they get an underhook, and I get an underhook on them. It's just like, and it just seems like so obvious to me. I just know they're going to let me get the underhook, and because they're going for the, not even just position before submission, control before submission, but just control in general before advancing. Really, you need to control before you advance. And they try to advance before they have any control. And, if I've got an underhook, when you're trying to knee slide, you're not controlling me. I'm going to take I'm going to take your back. I'm going to sweep you. But they go anyways, just like clockwork. It happens all the time. People always try to knee slide without getting grips that control me first. And just, okay, I'll take the underhook then.
Well, when it comes to submissions in particular, to go even further off that, I was having a conversation with one of my students, and they're asking me about, like, I think it was a toe hold and a heel hook. Like, how do you pick which one to go for? Because most of the time, you can go for either. And what I kind of realized, and what we've been playing with a lot, is that whatever joint you're trying to submit, the control you need is of one joint closer to the torso. So if I want to submit your knee, heel hook, I need to control your hip. Because I'm sure we've all gone for a heel hook where you don't have control of the hip, and the guy's going to lift his hips, they're rolling, they're turning, and it's really hard. So if I don't have control of the hip, I'm going to go for the toe hold, because to attack the ankle, I really only need control of your knee. It goes to the same for arms. I mean, you hear a lot of people say, what is an armbar attack? And you go the elbow. And I go, what do you have to control? And people go, the elbow. No, you have to control the shoulder. Most people who do good arm bars know that, like, if you want to arm bar someone and you have like super loose splayed legs and that person's shoulder can move and roll, it's really hard to finish an arm bar without controlling the shoulder. Same thing for a wrist. I'd want the wrist. I only need to control the elbow.
Yeah, see, I kind of disagree with you there on that. Where it comes to like the arm bar is a good example. Like, I think that the wrist is way more important than the shoulder, because if you control the wrist, they can be able to turn different ways with their shoulder. But as long as you have the wrist controlled, you can finish at lots of different angles, right? Where if you don't have the wrist control, but you have the shoulder control well, yeah, they're gonna be able to get out.
I see. I think the wrist is important to control the grip for the finish, but it's really hard. Like, I was playing around with some of my students, and I basically said, like, try and arm bar me without controlling my shoulder. Like, so put, instead of the feet like across my chest and head, put both of them on the close side of the body and arm bar that. And if my shoulder can elevate and my body can go with it, you've got to, like, you might be able to do it if you hit the right angle, or someone's not got a bendy shoulder, or they don't move well, you might be able to do it. But the amount of pull and leverage you're going to have to put on that arm is significant. A great example I always use is like it's an MMA fight, the GSP Dan Hardy armbar, where GSP's legs are splayed open about as wide as you can get. There's no control over the shoulder. And yeah, I mean, he's got a lot of pressure on Dan's elbow. It's clearly uncomfortable, but if you watch it, I mean, he's controlling the wrist, controlling the elbow, but Dan's shoulder is able to lift and move and turn with all of the pressure and adjustments George makes. And eventually he does get out. Not saying it's impossible to finish that way. Obviously, I mean, you can see people finish leg locks without controlling the knee line if you're just quick or good enough on it, or hit, the exact right control, or are really adept at manipulating submissions in a way that, you're comfortable with and maybe the person you're against is not. But it makes it a lot easier if I just control that shoulder and limit the amount the person can move.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I still disagree. Sorry, Joey. I think the wrist. Good. Yeah, I think the wrist is way more important than the shoulder. And I think that the Dan Hardy GSP example is just an example of the fact that, to me at least, is that you need a lot of braking pressure to actually break an armbar. If you just have the standard grip of the wrist, like, you can definitely hurt someone and get some pops, but to really mess someone up, like going underneath your armpit is going to create way more leverage because their wrist is lower on your body. Because if you hold the wrist close to your chest, which you should do for a good armbar, your chest can only go so far back in relation to when you extend your hips. But if you bring the wrist in your armpit, well, then it's like behind your chest, and then you can really, as you lift your hips up, it's just it goes back way further. So yeah, I don't know. I think that there's so many different ways to position your legs in an armbar, and as long as you see, I don't think this is shoulder so much. I think it's more so the head. Like, you need to control the head, which you can use using your hamstring, or you can use if your shin's in front, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not a big proponent of like even having to pinch your knees in armbar personally. I just think that you can have those wide legs just fine as long as you hold the wrist good, because yeah, the wrist is way more important in my opinion, at least. But yeah, I'd like to hear your take.
Well, that's so when you said like tucking the arm under the armpit, I mean, obviously, like, we both do things different ways. That's the beauty of jiu-jitsu, is like people can do things slightly differently. For me, if I can keep the person's shoulder below my hips, just based on the angle of the arm, I don't have to pull it nearly as far back to get that pressure, because the shoulder can't lift, so the elbow can't go as far down. If the shoulder can come up, now I have to get that hand down more. And you're right there, I would have to start really tucking it in my armpit to be able to get that lever. So like, I look at it like almost like a teeter-totter style of thing, where your groin or whatever you have the hip to control on the back is like the middle thing in the teeter-totter. If I pull down on the end of the teeter-totter, the other end comes up. It doesn't break the board or whatever's on top of the teeter-totter. But if you hold one end down with an anvil and put enough pressure, it'll snap in the middle. So that's kind of how I look at the armbar, is a lot like that mechanic, where you have to control both ends of this essentially board, which is their straightened arm, to actually get a braking pressure. If I just control the one end, the other end is going to lift. So either the shoulder will lift up, or if I just control the shoulder, the arm hand will lift up. So you do kind of have to have both ends of that.
Yeah, I agree. It needs to have both for sure. But yeah, I still think the wrist is more important. I don't know. Because they can't get away. There's impossible to get away if you control the wrist. But if you have not as good control of the wrist, yeah, they're gonna get away. But yeah, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to say.
I'm staying out of this one.
Yeah, no, it's a good discussion to have for sure. Yeah, I guess next time we see each other, let's test it out. I'll try to armbar you without great shoulder control, and you try to armbar me without great wrist control. But they're both important. We agree. So like, yeah, we're kind of disagreeing with what's more important, I guess. And I think the wrist is more important. But yeah.
Yeah, I think like a lot of things in jiu-jitsu, it's you can't just have one thing. There are like a hierarchy of controls you have to have to do most things. And on the armbar, somewhere on everyone's list, you're going to have control of the wrist, control of the body. Because like you can't just hold someone's wrist and armbar. It's not possible if I don't control the head, the body, the shoulder, something closer. And it's also impossible to armbar someone if you just control the head and body and you're not holding their arm. They'll just bring their arms together. It's not an armbar at that point. You're just kind of beside someone. So like most things require different controls. I think it just depends which control you value more.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely need to have control both sides of the lever. That's definitely true. And yeah, like what concepts have like really helped you a lot in your grappling, Joey?
So especially lately, like the big concepts for me are like hip height. So when I want to sweep, I have really two options. I can lift my hips above yours to try and, take you over by using my hips, or I can scoot my hips. I'm really bad with names for certain things, but I can get my hips underneath you to elevate you and make you light to tilt either direction. So most sweeps submissions require your hips to be a certain height in relation to your opponents. And if you can understand how the height of your hips to your opponents, make sense in a certain situation and how they interact, it really tells you which techniques to choose in a given situation.
Yeah, I call that loading the hips, like loading their weight onto your hips, like getting your hips underneath. That's what I call it. But it's a lot of things in general, actually, I've like kind of made my own terms for, and I just like hope no one like says like, oh, that's like, there's already a term for that. Like, for example, like I came up, I don't know if it's a thing already, like reverse underhook. So like, just like octopus guard, for example, the person on top has a reverse underhook because it's like an underhook, but you're like opposite. But I don't know if that's the correct name for it, or also like the front headlock where instead of your hips facing down, they're facing up. Like, so like you do like a rolling front headlock and you're both facing up. I call that an inverted front headlock, and no one's told me that's not what it is. So like there's a bunch of terms, like so many examples I could give of stuff like I've just made up. And yeah, so far so good.
I think the names are really irrelevant as long as it makes sense to you and whoever you teach it to. Like this, I'm going to get some hate for this, but this is my biggest gripe with like, for instance, gyms like 10th Planet that have some really wacky nomenclature for some of their techniques. Is if I'm explaining to someone newer or maybe not super versed in, how they describe things, what you're doing, and I'm using ridiculous names that don't make sense, it doesn't really tell the athlete what to do. But if I say, get a like inverted headlock, like at least the name gives me some indication of what I should be looking to do. So like, things like an underhook. An underhook is a great name because I say, get an underhook. Under and hook, figure it out. You might not do it perfect if you've never done an underhook before or heard what it's called, but you at least gives you an idea. I'm looking to get underneath something and hook it. Okay, well, we can figure it out. So like, I'm not too big on like, this has to be like the correct name for everything. I just like, if you're going to name things, just make sure they make sense.
What about in competition though? If you yell out, go for an underhook, they're going to know, the guy's going to know what you want. But if you're in 10th Planet, I don't know what they call it, and it's some, smoke a joint or whatever, and they go for an underhook, that could confuse the competitor.
Sure. It could also confuse your own competitor, because now I have to spend so much time, not just teaching you the techniques, the concepts, and how to grapple, but now I've got to basically give you a list of names and have you memorize what each of these names are and how they interact and which moves they are. And God forbid you screw one of them up and you go for the wrong thing because you couldn't relate this unrelated name to a technique because it doesn't make any sense. And people are trying to memorize moves now and names. And it's just, I think it does more harm than good in the long run for athletes.
I think a good example of that is using the Japanese terms for like certain leg locks and throws or takedowns and like arm bars and stuff. Like all these Japanese terms are just they make sense in that language. It's just like like outside foot trip, but in Japanese, and which again makes sense when you speak Japanese. But like when you don't, it's just I don't know why people use the Japanese terms. It just doesn't make any sense to me. But so it makes it just because I can't remember all these like Japanese terms or whatever, right? I can remember the English terms, and Japanese people I'm sure can remember the Japanese terms that they use. So I don't get why we're doing this like weird thing. I think it's weird, and Dan Hart really likes it. And one thing he says, which is a lot of people find funny, I don't even know what it means, is a cranial shift. Like, what is a cranial shift?
That doesn't make any sense. Cranium's your head. You're moving their head. Just say moving their head.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Instead of saying that, he says cranial shift. Yeah. I don't know. I've actually heard him say that. I see on Reddit all the time people making fun of the fact that he says that. So, I don't know.
Do you think some coaches use like Japanese names or like terms like cranial shift to make themselves sound smarter so that people maybe like think you're smarter and will be more likely to believe what you're saying or listen because they're like, oh, that guy's super smart. He's talking Japanese.
I 100% think that 100%. I think that's why these guys use the Japanese terms and all this other stuff. A lot of people just like the sound of their own voice, and they like, sounding smart to people, but they're just pseudo intellectuals. I'm not saying Dana Hart is like, they're not talking shit about Dana Hart, but like many people are like that. They just want clout. They want to like feel important, but I try to do the opposite. Like, I don't think I'm that, important to me. Like, I'm not going to take myself that serious where I'm like saying all this weird shit and saying like, yeah, cranial shift. Like, I don't know. I'm just like, you move the head, like it's the head.
Do you think maybe using the Japanese terms is just to pay homage to like the founders of the sport, coming from jiu-jitsu to judo to Brazilian jiu-jitsu, paying homage to the original, country it came from maybe?
Well, I mean, didn't a lot of Japanese jiu-jitsu come from China originally? I could be wrong.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I could be definitely wrong. But like, if we want to go that far back with things, we could like really start talking some weird languages. You know what I mean? Or why don't we just like for certain things use Latin? You know what I mean? Like it makes sense to use the language you have, in my opinion. Like, I don't know. I don't want to piss people off either.
No, I mean, we do it at our gym, even for like judo, because we do a lot of like wrestling and stand-up takedowns. All the names for techniques in judo, like they have their Japanese names, but they all basically just directly translate into what you're doing with the throw, like major inner reap. Why am I going to say a Japanese term when I can just use the major hip toss? Hey, guys, do your hip toss. Cool. If I use a Japanese term, people in my gym will look at me and be like, what? But if I say, just do a hip throw from there, they're like, oh, hip throw. I know what hip throw means. I got to use my hip. I got to do the throw. There it is. It's so much simpler to just speak in the language of your students.
Yeah, the only Japanese terms I'll use are just ones that, like uchimata. You know what I mean? Like most people know what uchimata is, but like, I'm not going to start like calling like an armbar a juji katami. I think that's what it's called, right? Is that what it is?
Something katami, yeah.
I think so. I don't speak Japanese.
Butterfly sweep is a sumigeshi, is it not?
I think so.
I hear Den Her saying sumigeshi all the time, so.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, again, I don't see the point of that. Strange to me for sure, but jiu-jitsu is a weird place, and especially like people just like to use their their black belts to get them to get people to really like think they're really cool. And this happens a lot with like grooming, even like something I've been seeing a lot on Reddit is stories of people like younger females getting kind of groomed by their instructors, which is super messed up. And but that's not the only issue. Like there's a lot of issues just in general, like instructors trying to make it out like they're some like sage of life. They're so smart. They're like a black belt in life, giving all this life advice, and you got to respect them for everything they do. And they're great, but like you just teach jiu-jitsu, bro. Like calm down. But it becomes dangerous when it is like grooming and stuff like that. And I've also heard stories of like black belts like sleeping with students' wives and stuff like that and whatever, you know, but these people, and not all of them, but some of them, they like drink the Kool-Aid where they think that like, yeah, you know, my instructor's amazing. Yeah, your wife. Yeah, go sleep with him. Yeah, no problem. Like, not not happening.
No.
Come on, man.
That's a cult, bro. That, if you're, isn't that like one of the trademarks of most cults, that the guy in charge gets to like sleep with people's wives?
Yeah.
That's about as culty as it gets. Yeah, I think way too many black belts take themselves too seriously. Like, man, like, I don't know, people at my gym, if they do, I'm like, hey, listen, I'm just a guy who's really good at rolling around the floor with other guys. Like, that's all I have here. I'm just better at rolling around on the floor. Like, I can't imagine having people come into your gym who are like engineers or like, you know, oh God forbid, someone who like actually teaches at a college and being like, no, you have to call me professor. I'm so smart and intelligent. It's like, man, you know how to roll around with other sweaty dudes. Like, let's take this down a notch. Let's have some fun, you know?
Yeah, well, often people cite jiu-jitsu as like a great equalizer. So like, you know, it doesn't matter what profession you are, we're all equal on the mat. So if it's like a doctor or if it's like you know, it's a student or like a criminal or something like that, we're all just, you know, we're all just grapplers. But then it changes when it's the instructor. Then the instructor's like, oh my God, it's an instructor, like, black belt.
I don't care what my students do for a living, but if we're going to pretend we're all equals on the mat, like that's got to extend to everyone, like whatever belt you are. Like you could be, you know, the worst job in the world or the best job in the world. We're all people doing the same hobby when we're there. We're equal or we're not. You get to pick at your gym. Like, are some people better than others? That's not a gym I'd want to be at personally, but it can't be both.
That's my favorite part about jiu-jitsu is that everybody's equal. I'm on the scale of dirtbag to, you know, professional. I was a tattoo artist, so I'm on the lower end of the dirtbag scale, and I get to roll doctors, and we're all equal, and lawyers and all sorts of professionals. We're all equal on the mat. So that's what I love about it.
Yeah, that's why I always say, like, don't put anyone on the pedestal. Like, it doesn't matter who it is. If it's like, even like, you know, if it's a cool profession, if it's like the president or like the prime minister or whoever it is, like, they're just people. Like, who cares? You know what I mean? And same with competitors. Like, so many people put these people on pedestals. They just can't believe, like, they're like godly to them. They're just, this person's just good at jiu-jitsu. Like, calm down. You know, I see it all the time. Or like, you know, a lot of what's it called, like logical fallacies. So sometimes when people argue with me on online, which some people love to do, like especially when they're lower belts, but I get that can be a logical fallacy too, is like saying that. But you know, they cite you know, what's it called, like they appeal to authority. They're like, oh, this person said this person said that. Give me your argument for why you disagree with me. Don't just say, like, you know, because for example, someone said and again, I'm not complaining about negative comments, just give an example. But like today I woke up to a comment, someone, because I wrote, okay, it was a rear naked choke that I showed, and I was off to the side a little bit with my elbow. And then they're like, oh, Matt Serra disagrees. You have to have it in the middle. Well, it's like, okay, Matt Serra disagrees. Like, what's your argument here? Right. And because I'm telling them, like, no, you can, it's actually a little better to have not a little better. It's better to have your elbow a little off to the side, because actually, if the people should test this out, they'll see if you wrap it up completely in the middle, a lot of your pressure is going to go to like the hard part of the neck. But if you move your elbow a little off to the side, then the pressure is going to go completely in line with the neck. And that's exactly what Danaher shows and other guys. When you start bringing the elbow back, and then what that does is it brings the forearm more in line with the neck and compresses it more, because just having it right in the middle and squeezing, it just puts your bicep and forearm together into their neck. But it's actually a pretty weak movement compared to dropping the elbow back, which forces the forearm way more into the neck. And people just love, like, I got you moments. They try to find things like where they try to like prove someone that's teaching or on social media wrong, just because some other person says something different. But I guarantee if I talk to Matt Serra about it, I don't think he would disagree with that. Putting it off to the side a little bit is actually really good too. So yeah, people are weird.
I love it, man. I will debate people forever on techniques. And I do. This is like the most common thing, though. Someone will pull a video of someone showing something, and it's always out of context too. The argument there is like, Matt Serra said this. Yeah, you've got a 2-second clip of Matt Serra saying that, but you're not getting the full context of the lesson or the question or what he's being asked or anything. You just have this little clip of someone saying something, and people will try and say, well, this guy said this. And I don't want to debate a technique or a move or a concept with someone if all you're doing is telling me someone else's opinion? If that's the case, let me debate it with the guy. Because if all you have is what someone else said, clearly you don't understand what you're talking about enough to formulate your own reasons why you think this is the case. And then why am I debating you? It's not worth it.
Yeah, exactly. Man, it happens all the time. Another good example, I showed a Von Flue choke on my YouTube and like on a YouTube short. And so when you have your feet or your knees off the mat, you can drive more into their neck, but it also creates more opportunity for them to get their guard back. So it can be like a balance between like wanting to be on your knees and wanting to drive into them. And like you need to kind of assess that as they are trying to defend. And, you know, and then, so I had like a couple of people say, oh, you got to be on your knees, you know, whatever. It's like, it depends. So they don't have all the context, but then, Von Flue, like the guy actually created the choke. He comments on the video, like, great demonstration of my choke. I'm like, there you go. You know what I mean? It's just, it's so silly. People are so silly. They love, I got you moments. And yeah, I love arguing with people too. And sometimes when I argue back with people, other people are like, oh, you know, I'm disappointed. You know, you don't need to like defend yourself, this and that. Well, I like arguing with people like that are dumb and want to, you know, I'm competitive. If someone wants to tell me I'm wrong, let's go. I'll debate all day. You know, like literally I'll do it all day. Like, fucking, you know what I mean? But I'm like enjoying that. It's not like bringing harm to my life. I'm not like sad about it. You know, certain comments have, you know, made me upset before, but I've gone way past that. And now, but the majority of comments just, yeah, that are negative, they just, I'm like, okay, let's go. You know, we've got a little competition here, you know?
I laugh at them, and I'm sure Phaesia's going to have to cut this part or bleep this word out, but I was called a on one of the videos, and I fucking laughed so hard. That was the one where I turned into you the wrong way. And I answered myself, yeah, sometimes I'm, you know, like I said, you might have to bleep that out, but fuck, that makes me laugh so hard when people are ragging on me, because I know overall I'm decent and stuff like that. And I just laugh at it.
Well, often these people are just projecting their own insecurities, because another example using that is people telling me I was mean to you during that thing where I was just like laughing with you. Like it was funny, you know, my reaction was funny.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, it's just banter.
And then you got idiots saying, oh, you're so mean or whatever. It's like, if you feel like that was mean, if it was done to you, then probably you're insecure. Probably you just have a hard time. You don't have that dynamic with your friends or with anyone. Like that's a very normal dynamic to, like, you know, just to banter a little bit like that. So yeah.
I must have watched that 10 times, and everybody that saw it said it was hilarious, us going back and forth, and you weren't mean at all. You weren't anything. There's a smile in your face, and there's, you know, laughter in your voice, and we all had a good time. Yeah. Everybody fucks up now and then too. I fuck up all the time.
I show all, like, anytime I fuck up, I try to show like a video of it. It's funny. So if like the wrist lock video at the end, I got a bleeper where I'm like, I start to like ask Scott a question. I'm like, fuck. And
yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, I thought it was funny, you know, like, just, I don't know, people, they take themselves too serious and then they project that onto others. Like, like I don't take myself serious. And I don't take, you know, you serious in that sense if you're fucking up, you know what I mean? Yeah. So yeah, fuck. People annoy me big time, but not too bad. Again, I've gotten over that kind of stuff. But this, you know what I wish I could do? Anyone that disagrees with me, instead of arguing, I just wish we could roll. I would love that so much. It would save so much time, and they would realize really quick that they're wrong. And you know, like that guy for the wrist lock, you know, on Reddit, tell me, oh, he's like mad that I'm showing that I display some like niche techniques. It's like, bro, let's roll, and I'll hit one of those on you. I guarantee it. I'll hit one of those on you. But yeah, whatever.
That's what made me actually nervous to roll you the next time, is that you're going to pull out some wrist locks on me.
Oh, I'm going to try. Yeah, not just on you, but everyone. You know, I'll be gentle, but I want to try those wrist locks because, yeah, if these things Bullshido doesn't work, well, I bet you I can get it to work, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, if you're good enough, any technique kind of works. If you're good enough, you can pretty much make anything work.
Yeah, and we don't need to be super serious all the time when we're rolling. Like, I love this like double armbar, which is actually more of like a shoulder lock, and it's like two shoulder locks kind of. And is it low percentage? Yeah, but like, do I like doing it? I also, yes, you know. So like, it can be a fun thing to do, and like, you know, I can show people that, and it's no problem. And yeah, that's actually a good one too, which is funny to me. Like, I called it like a double armbar, and then people in the comments like, it's a shoulder lock. Like, it's okay, guys. It looks just like an armbar. I called it a double armbar. It's not a big deal. But now I just paraphrase it with, okay, it's a shoulder lock. But just because, yeah, people annoy me. But again, not talking about negative comments.
Are you starting to come around a bit on lockdown? Because I noticed in class last night when you were showing ways to control the lower body, you added lockdown in. That's the first time ever in 4 years I've heard you use that.
Yeah, not really. I mean,
Fuck,
yeah.
I'm getting excited over here.
In a sense, yes. In a sense, yeah. Well, it also demonstrates my point. So what I was trying to say is like, you need to use what you have available, because what do you do with that outside leg and half guard, right? Well, you can do butterfly, half guard, you can do knee shield, you can do lockdown. Like there's only so many places you can position your leg, right? So I had to include that. But yeah, it's not that I think lockdown's horrible. It's just like, my big gripe with it is just I've seen so many knee injuries from it, and it just. But you're safe with it 100%. But I've seen so many that just really, yeah, I don't like it too much.
I think the knee injuries come from when they swing. They try to swing the leg to the left if you're on your back and the guy's passing to their right. And that's when you see the guy's knee pop. I always keep my knees tucked in towards me so that I don't overextend their knee or hyperextend their knee like we see in that tournament that you commented on, or the guy's knee exploded from it. But yeah, I keep my knees tucked in tight to me. I've never hurt anybody's knee.
Yeah. And then it comes down to, like I've been saying for a long time, like jiu-jitsu is not as dangerous as people think it is. It's lack of jiu-jitsu. So like the reason why you're safe with it is because you have good jiu-jitsu. You understand what's going to hurt someone, what won't hurt someone. But then there's, people, they don't have that jiu-jitsu, and then they use it, and then they hurt people. Then they're like, oh my God, jiu-jitsu is so dangerous. But no, it's like lack of jiu-jitsu.
Plus, if I see somebody's going to hurt themselves, I'm going to abandon the technique.
Yeah.
Me getting that tap or that sweep is not worth them blowing their knee out.
Exactly, because you're a good training partner.
Oh, thank you.
And it's really frustrating for me to see, like, how, again, it comes down to where I'm complaining about, or not complaining, but talking about like how it's not often taught to protect your head. It's often not taught either to go chill on your training partners, not hurt them. Like I did like a vertical, like a reel on Instagram where it's like, go slow and control the armbar, crank submissions. And like, for some people, that's just, it's like, foreign to them. They're just like, they don't have that in their gym. It's not talked about. Like, people are just ripping on submissions. It's like, that should be the norm to not crank. But I feel like it's the norm to crank in so many gyms. And yeah, it's just frustrating to see.
Well, it makes me happy during every class, because we have beginners joining all the time, that you always say to them, go slow, be controlled. Don't just rip this, because if I'm going to roll with them and I let them play and give them my arm, they're not going to crank it right off. They're going to know to go slow and be controlled. So I really appreciate that as a student.
Yeah, no problem. I don't want anyone to get hurt. And like a good example too of what you mentioned, because I think it's kind of cool. Like we did like Americanas one day, and I wanted people to drill like already having it locked in, because I think that having like skills and working on like the end range will really help you. Like, okay, I know how to finish Americana. Like I've done it before in drilling, and now you're going to start pursuing actually entering it now. Whereas like if you just try to pursue entering it and you also have crappy finishing mechanics, you might just abandon that technique altogether. But then when you put people in a scenario where they're already in Americana, where they might not have been otherwise, if these people start cranking them, someone's going to get hurt, right? So that can lead to more injuries doing a drill like that. So like I'm like very like adamant, like do not crank, like do not hurt your partner. And I think that's like very important, because it's a great tool, like a great drill. But in the wrong gym, there's going to be so many people with cranked off shoulders and whatnot. And yeah, our bodies are fragile. We gotta protect them. I think what would be good is to do that drill and be like, if anyone gets hurt, the other person gets kicked out, like for that drill. But even just in general, like a lot of injuries are those signs injuries, like they just happen and you can't just blame the person. But if you're doing a drill where you're starting the Americana, you're starting in it, and you hurt the person, then you messed up. Like you didn't need to do that.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it before and I'll say it forever. If you can't do a technique slow and controlled, you can't do the technique. That you just shouldn't be doing it. You gotta work on it first, get better at it, and then you can start doing it. Like if someone goes for an armbar and they can't do it slow, like I tell some of my guys who are trying to get better at it, like armbars, for instance, I say like, you should be able to hold the arm for 25, 30 seconds and then finish. If you can't hold the arm straight for 25 seconds, you really don't have the control. I mean, I know, Jordan, you're really good at arm bars. People who roll with them will know Jordan's really good at arm bars. Like once you've straightened someone's arm and you put the control, they don't go anywhere. Like you'll stay here until I decide this is either going to get finished or I let you go.
Yeah, and it's so silly to me. People like sometimes I do. People I had that position on people. I got the arm bar. I'm going nice and slow, and they're just like taking forever to tap. I'm like, okay, it's over. Like, what are you doing? Like, and I'll tell them like, you should. I'm nice. I'm not going to hurt you, but like, you don't want to risk that. You don't want to do that. Just like tap when your arms extended, right? And man, yeah, that's the problem too. People are very stubborn, and then they think jiu-jitsu is more dangerous than it is, but in reality, they're just being stubborn and being dumb. And yeah, I was gonna say something else, but I forget. But yeah, that's been like over an hour. Pretty good discussion. Hope people liked it. And yeah, sorry, I guess, about taking so long to have another episode. Just a lot of things got in the way, but we're gonna try to be consistent, even though it's gonna be hard to next week because Friday and just the whole week, Joe Breeza is gonna be down for a wrestling for jiu-jitsu instructional. And so I don't know if I'll be able to do one on Friday. So it might be 2 weeks before you guys hear another podcast from us, but we'll try to work around that. We'll see what we can do. Maybe we can get Joe on the podcast.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. Talk some wrestling. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the podcast. If you're still here, please leave a comment or fist bump, and we'll see you next time.